OMG, I hate this character. Why didn't they make him a vampire? Oh my gosh, she should have been made so much nicer than this. Gosh, I hate this so much. Okay, if that's what you want to say, bear into me. This isn't good. I hate this. Hit me harder. I hate this so freaking much. Good gosh, can you hit me any harder? Yeah, burn it. You should burn this. I didn't mean it. This was supposed to be a beta reading. Oh, well, I would have written it differently. Hello, Ian Kirkpatrick here. That was so unnatural. The room is not actually as dark as it looks. So today we're going to be talking about critique partners. What makes a good critique partner, what you should look at doing if you want to be a better critique partner. Because let me tell you, just because you write doesn't necessarily make you a good critique partner. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with, having gone in and out of different writing groups. I've talked to a number of people that go, well, I'm a writer, but I don't feel qualified enough to critique something in a group. And that's a normal thing. And also, I want to say, technically, critiquing, like anything else, is a skill that you develop over time with exposure and practice and learning. And being able to critique is not only helpful to other writers, but it's also helpful to yourself because it helps you analyze text better, see what you're doing that other people are doing that it might not work well or it might work really well, and then how to apply what you're seeing to your own work as well. So critiquing is super important. So let's define the two things first. If you really want to peel it back, a beta reader is somebody that is going to read your manuscript and tell you whether it's good or not, just as a whole, while a critique partner can give you specific details. A couple things to keep in mind with a good critique partner is, one, they don't need to be in the same genre as you. A critique partner can offer feedback even if they write something completely different. However, they have to understand your point of view, or they have to understand you as a person and the craft of writing. You really can't have a critique partner who is a newbie to writing, because they're not going to be able to give you the kind of feedback you need that's so pointed to help you bring out what is missing in your in your manuscript. When you're looking for a critique partner, you want somebody who has experience in writing, isn't afraid to give an honest opinion, likes the genre that you write in, or at least respects it. You can't have somebody critique that has zero interest in what you're doing. Just because somebody isn't into your genre doesn't necessarily mean that your book is bad. Mismatching somebody as a critique partner can be detrimental to your growth, detrimental to your story, and detrimental to your voice. Probably one of the worst mentor experiences that I've ever had at university, and that's saying something. I was in my third term, which is the major term where you write your academic paper, as well as you really start working on your manuscript. And so this was the first time I sat down with this mentor, who was a professor at the university, mind you. And so before this, we hadn't really talked. I'd taken some seminars from him. And so we sit down, and I picked him because he said he was German and he wrote dark fables. And so my story was a black comedy. And so I was like, hopefully this will get some of the taste that I need, because it is dark. And so we sit down at the table, and he knows what my project is because it was submitted to him, and he got to choose from the people who wanted him as their mentor. And so we sit down, and the very first thing he says to me is, how does it feel to be writing a novel that will never be published? Not a great way to start off a mentorship. And I can say for certain that I don't believe that was the greatest mentorship that I could have had that term. So it's very important to find a mentor or a critique partner who believes in what you're doing and who isn't just going to try to rip it down because they don't like it or they don't understand it. That's another difficult thing, is if, say, you're trying to write comedy, which one of my main genres is comedy. If somebody goes in and they don't have a sense of humor, they're either going to get offended or they're not going to get the jokes, and they're going to take everything you say as a joke in earnest, and then they're not going to get it. They're going to say, this is unbelievable, this is ridiculous, this wouldn't happen. Well, what if the point was that it is supposed to be ridiculous because you've written it that way? So always remember to look at the person's personality and what they write before you pick them as a critique partner. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's nothing personal, but picking a good critique partner is essential if you're going to have a helpful relationship. Now, I know so many writers struggle with being a good critique partner because there really aren't any classes on how to be a good critique partner, and there really aren't any classes on what to be looking for if you are critiquing somebody's work. So these are 5 areas in which to focus if you want to learn how to be a good critique partner that is helpful to another person, and how to tell if the other person is really helping your manuscript, because this is going to go both ways. Number 1, when you're critiquing a manuscript, the technical advice should be precise. I've been in critique groups where the responses to the stuff was just circling areas or putting a question mark somewhere, and that's not super helpful for a writer who's going through the text to know what that means. Is the question confused? Does the person not know what's going on? Is the sentence just kind of messy? So when you're responding to when you're critiquing somebody's work, you want to be as precise as possible so the author can look at those notes and know exactly what they need to do. So usually, if it's a confusing or awkward to read sentence, I'll put awkward syntax, or I will explain how it's confusing if it's a really that bad. Sometimes I'll just say, I don't know what this means. But you always want to make sure that the author who's receiving your feedback knows exactly what it is that you're trying to say when they're looking at your feedback. Number 2 is give examples when possible. So if you're telling somebody that something is hard to read, or the narration is going on for too long and it could be cut, or you think that this moment in this narration is an opportunity to be precise and to give detail on that character background. I don't know about other authors, but for me, it's always helpful to know what somebody is talking about when they reference something. If it could be shortened, if it could be clip, or just if an area is repeating itself somewhere in the text, mark it to give examples of your statements. I can't express how difficult it is for me as an author when somebody says this text is repeating, but they don't tell you where in your 250-page manuscript the text is repeating. Because now you can't compare what it is they're seeing. So if you can reference something in the text that you're critiquing specifically, always do that. Number 3 is don't rewrite the person's story. Stay away from stuff like I would do it like this, or this is how I would do it. Basically, that's just the same way of saying the same thing. It's not your story. The story you have to tell will always be different than the author's, and the author isn't trying to write your story, they're trying to tell theirs. This leads me into number 4, which is try to understand what the author is doing. You want to recognize their weaknesses, their strengths, and just how they're trying to accomplish the goal of that overall story. If somebody is trying to tell the story of somebody struggle with depression, but that character never really shows depression, then you want to critique that and let them know, well, the character was really excited all throughout this time, and I didn't see any expression of depression. But if the person's goal is to show something happy, playful, that the person is trying to get enough money to purchase a candy shop on the end of the street, then you want to see them making those gains or choices towards that goal. If they say that the story is about somebody trying to go and buy a candy shop and then they run off and just rob a bank, and I mean, that is an option to buy a candy shop, but you have to understand where the author is trying to go and then critique the story in that direction. Not understand where the author is trying to go, but then critique it in the direction you would take it, or not even understand it at all and still just go, well, I would have done it this way, and then you're writing a completely different story. In order to best critique somebody's work, you need to understand what it is they're trying to accomplish and how best the toolkit you have and what toolkit you have to help get them there. And number 5, which is probably the most important thing because it will affect everything on this list, anything that you say that has to do with feelings, interpretation, character personality, give the analysis of what you saw, not what you think should have been written or how you would have liked to see it or how you would have done it. This kind of ties back into number 3 with it's not about what you would do. It's about what this person would do. It's about what this person is writing. Any response that's based on feelings or personal preference, like I would have done this, or I could see this, or I would have done this, that's all subjective. Let the author know how the characters came off, how the story came off. Did they come off desperate? Did they come off disassociated? Did they come off bratty? Letting them know how the characters read to you will let the author know if their intention for that character was actually read by the reader, or if it's something else. Because if I write, say, a depressed character or a character I think is depressed, and someone says, this character is pretty happy-go-lucky, and I don't really see them dragging at all, I don't see them struggling with anything at all, then I know that I didn't do enough to have that character's struggles come through. However, if somebody goes, oh, this character felt really demotivated or was kind of depressing to read, then I'll know that I've done the right thing. And then if you're looking at a cast of bad characters, it's not really helpful if you say, I would have made this character nicer, or I would have made this character more of a dick so that I knew I needed to hate him by the time that he died. Is the author's intention for you to hate that character when they die, or is the author's intention for you to feel apathetic, or is the author's intention for you to like that character? So the better way to go about judging characters or situations is to say how you read them, what that character was like, as opposed to what you would have liked them to be. In my experience, I've received a lot of responses that are more like, I have a preference towards this thing, or this is how I would have done it, or I've even had somebody look at a sci-fi I was writing and then they Googled some of my made-up sci-fi words and said they couldn't find them anywhere. And that's not super helpful for critiquing. It just shows somebody doesn't know the genre and can't really accept something that's outside of their usual genre. And so knowing how to find what is helpful from a critique partner or from a critique group, and what feedback to discard because it's not helpful and it's personal opinion, that is excessively helpful in knowing and keeping track of your self-confidence. Because if you just look at everybody's personal feelings when it comes to your work as opposed to how it's reading, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And another thing with that is you're never going to be able to control everybody's interpretation of your characters. So if you know, well, I wrote this character to be distant, I wrote this character to be sweet, and that's how it's coming off in 80% of the cases, 90% of the cases, then you know you're doing something right. If everybody in the room has a different interpretation, then you might start looking for how to strengthen the answer you want, while knowing you're never going to be able to control how everybody interprets your story. Unfortunately, writing is an art, which means it's up for interpretation to some extent. Of course, before getting too much into a relationship with a beta reader or a critique partner, always discuss what it is you're looking for. And if you are offering your services as a beta or a critique partner, always ask the author what kind of feedback they're looking for, how much detail they're looking for, so that way when they receive your feedback, they're not necessarily surprised by what they get. Because if somebody goes out looking for beta readers and they end up getting a critique, it can be soul-crushing. Yeah. So, do you have any critique partner horror stories? Do you have any critique partner tips? Let me know in the comments down below if you like this sort of content. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know that I'm doing something right. And I will see you next time. Talk to you soon.